some life brought back into the space. So through Job Warehouse, we were designated to create an opportunity store, a dining area, and a community event function space for the Salvation Army to kind of rent out and give back to the community a little bit more. Through my designs, I think with opportunity stores, I very much view them as like, what kind of treasure can you come in and find? So I wanted to incorporate a little bit, just whimsical kind of materials and colors, just to reflect that a little bit. And I also wanted to explore a little bit with using mesh. I think it comes, steel mesh. It comes across as a little bit of an institutionalized material. So I wanted to explore just changing the color, seeing what forms I can make it to make it warm and inviting. And I think through the renders that I've done, it's really pushed through a lot of sunlight through the space. Like, even though I have the larger paneling, floor to ceiling, that light still filters through the mesh. Moving on to the dining space. So I wanted to very much have this as a social area. So there's no one-seated private dining. So all patrons either have to sit at a table or around the bar. I think the most important thing for me was to make sure that people were coming in and not kind of feeling isolated anymore. So just creating that social atmosphere where someone at the bar, they can talk to the person behind the counter, or they can talk to the person next to them. And I think it's just a lot nicer of an atmosphere. The other most important thing through Job Warehouse, I wanted to retain as much of the existing layout as possible. I think it's just such an old building that there was no need to completely tear down the insides, and obviously coming from a structural standpoint. So I just decided to create these openings in between the opportunity store and the restaurant, and actually using this wall, even though partly demolished, actually having that bar reflect through and along the wall. And for my upstairs area, I wanted to leave this as very much a place where the Salvation Army can hire it out for anything. So it's very much a community space. Local artists can showcase their designs and sell them. People can hold training seminars or job seminars or just general functions. And I've designed it that even though that there's 4 rooms, there is stacking partition doors that make them larger, 2 larger rooms, also incorporating a kitchen upstairs with the dumb waiter from downstairs to bring up food if someone did want catering through the area. And I think the other biggest thing within this dining space, create a place that people wanted to come, and a little bit of an installation. So using the lights as like a dining under the clouds. And just a place that people would want to come for lunch and come and bring their friends, and obviously generating that profit to keep funding Site A. And again, using this mesh through this area to filter, to connect it to the opportunity store, but still filter the light through. And this is just the floor plans that I showed you earlier. And the long section, just looking into how this space is utilised at the front. And my finishers board, but I really just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you guys to coming and listening to us today and taking time out of your busy schedules, but thank you.
Okay, thanks, Emily. Oh, fancy, nice. Ali, do you want to start?
Sure. Apologies for having to turn the camera off. I find with my bad reception that I can get better reception if I sometimes. So if I disappear for a bit, it's just because my reception's bad. Emily, I don't know whether you want to pull up your plans again. I really enjoyed perhaps not the Job Warehouse, but the first scheme for the Intercontinental Hotel. That's right. What I'm wondering about this, and if you could zoom up perhaps on the pods, one of the areas that have got the pods. Can you zoom into that? Yes, I'm wondering how are the families actually using these pods? Because it seems that the pods have been designed so that there's only one bed in them. Is that correct, or am I misreading it?
So they are double stacked. So the single pods, they've got 2 single beds. So there's one on the base and one on the bottom, and our larger pods have 2 double beds, so they can sleep the 4. So each family would have an individual pod.
So say, you know, there's a single mum, she would sleep in the double bed down the bottom, and then she would have a child up the top bunk. Is that correct?
Yeah, it kind of depends on whichever way, obviously the family's comfortable sleeping, but if it was a single mother and a single child, I think that they would be situated in the single pods, just so we can maximise the amount of families that do come through. And with the single sleeping pods, I did want to make sure that there was a lot more of a communal kind of walking space, just because the pods are quite small, whereas the larger pods do have that little area in front that the families can utilise.
Yeah, we've made this comment in the last presentation this morning. Some of these communal areas that are set aside for circulation can become very noisy. Because, you know, because of the nature of people coming and going, and the private spaces being very small, and therefore, you know, often things, you know, the belongings to people is spilt out onto the common area. So I'm finding that arrangement you're showing us a little challenging from a point of view of making it work, but I really enjoyed your presentation, and I think you've put a lot of work into it. Obviously, you've given people. It seems you've given people some tables and chairs. Is that correct? Outside, which is screened by the timber partition. Is that something you can show us, perhaps?
Unfortunately, not on my portfolio.
Right.
Just because I didn't take any perspective shots of those. But yeah, they were just kind of designed that if people did want to, I guess, spread out a little bit more, or sit the kids down, there was an area outside of the sleeping areas that they could do it, even though it's close by. And I guess there is still a risk of noise. It's not directly in the sleeping areas. And that was the reason why I did dedicate like a small lounge area that people could also utilize within the floor plan as well. Yeah,
I think those spaces are very important, because people do need to do activities. And I guess, I mean, you know, there's various arrangements and various, I suppose, management styles, but some providers require people to actually not be there during the day, not be, you know, only use these facilities at night, which then begs the question, when it comes to a family, well, what do you do for the rest of the time? You know, where do you live? And I guess would that be in the atrium? Have you created that space in that atrium space? Is that?
So the atrium downstairs is not a dedicated space that we've been given to use. So this is just solely on the first floor of the Intercontinental Hotel. So the atrium is actually in the basement. Right. Just that's that glass atrium area.
Yeah. I know the space. So these tables and chairs would be purely on those sort of balcony spaces. Is that what you've? Yeah. Okay.
That's what.
Yeah. Okay, it's a challenging location, challenging. I mean, in some sense ideal, but in another sense not at all ideal for what is you know, quite an intensive use, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it does get a little bit more difficult with families, whereas I suppose single people that are needing to rough sleep or don't have access to homes, it becomes a little bit easier to give those people support, even though they do have to leave throughout the day. It's a lot easier than to pack up young kids. So I think it's definitely a challenge to try and incorporate the same sort of principles and give them to a family.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. With the job warehouse scheme, I really enjoyed the way you've you've divided the spaces, and your comment about keeping the structure, that's very important in those, you know, they were very much cellular sort of buildings. I think it's terrific to see that you've tried hard to work with that cellular nature of the space. And there's good flexibility on your first floor. The way you've planned your first floor, it seems to me that it allows different functions to occur at the same time and to be timetabled, you know, flexibly. So that I enjoyed very much. So thank you for your presentation. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Karen, you're muted.
Sorry, I moved. I was. I'm just catching up his nibs on what we're doing. David, do you want to go now?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Emily. Yeah, I enjoyed your presentation. Thank you. If I could just start with the older fleet, the Intercontinental presentation. Yeah, I enjoyed the way you spoke about your project and presented it. I think it's challenging when you're talking about families, accommodating them and the different types. And I think the building, whilst it's a wonderful old building and a great readaptation idea, I think we're perhaps creating some sort of separated areas. It depends on the range and age of the children. You might have older children in there, and especially if there's younger ones, then you've got mothers that need to settle kids and so forth, and maybe those pod areas need to be revisited. The idea of separating perhaps with the bigger family unit versus smaller one, I guess, lends itself to deciding, well, younger children go into one area and older ones are in others, and perhaps some thinking about wherever there is some natural play areas rather than an open, undefined space between them. I suppose that's the question I suppose I would pose, and how that could work. I think you've made some really good points in your presentation about controlling access and thinking about how people enter into the facility and having some sensitivity to that, which I think is important. So I think that's an important thing to identify and how you do it. I think other comments I would make are probably more general ones, just given the format of how everything's being presented through these renderings and plan. Just looking at the website, the floor plan isn't on that one, so it was good that you've shown it in your presentation. So good to have it there for that. And I think, you know, your detail and material choice, I think, is good. I think the question we had yesterday with those presented when you're dealing with a double level pod is accessibility, but I think there's enough flexibility to say, well, people can use the ground level bed versus trying to get up to the bunks, and that's a great idea for the kids to play with. And appreciating obviously that this is short term, so the idea of, you know, somewhere for children especially to be able to pin something up or whatever and have their own little play areas becomes a little more limited because they're here only on a more temporary nature. The second one, the jobs warehouse, I think it was a very astute observation to work with the old building and recognise keeping the old the inherent structure of the old building, because that always poses technical issues structurally. I think so. There's a lot of good logic there. I think if there's perhaps a way in which to reveal, perhaps aesthetically, when I'm looking at your internal renders, is just a sense of revealing perhaps that old building and perhaps working between the two would be nice. And I guess thinking just from a more practical point of view, that the upper level, when you go through this rear stair and circulation, it brings you sort of to a dead-end corridor or dead-end passage. So whether there's an opportunity there to perhaps think of how that opens. I think the idea to cater with a kitchen on the first floor is a little more unique. I think most made the decision to have it on the ground floor, but that does lend the opportunity to have some sort of catering, or it could be a training kitchen or some other aspect. So there's some flexibility there. I think it seems a little bit set, that first floor, but I think a lot of the other things you've said and the general thinking behind what you're presenting is quite solid, and it was a nice presentation considering doing all this online. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're mute again, Karen.
Yeah, the tandem duo here, it's causing me concern. Christina, would you like to give us your views?
Yeah, I will. Thank you. And look, I'm probably going to echo a lot of Ellie and David's comments, but I think with the Intercontinental, great presentation first, Emily. Well done. Congratulations. I know it's been a really tough year, so well done for getting to this point. I think there's some really beautiful work that you've created and really beautifully presented as well. Very calm and clear. I think, yeah, interesting that you've created identity, between the pods using, I'm assuming that's the lighting that you spoke about earlier and colours, which is, it's always really interesting, I guess, when you're considering the types of, I guess the same repetitive pods and trying to create some uniqueness there. I know that's really, really tricky to do. And I wonder whether some of that could have been brought into maybe some of the fixtures and some of the lighter, looser kind of furniture items, I guess, that might give it that sense of purpose. But I think different people will start to bring some of that flavour to the pods as well. I appreciate that it's really, really tricky dealing with acoustics and ventilation in a space like this. But again, with the kids and the family kind of larger pods, that's probably going to be a challenge anywhere to kind of keep children quieter at a time where, someone else might be trying to rest. So that's definitely a challenge in one of these types of spaces. So, but I think all in all, you've catered to it really well. It is a challenging site. The atrium, as we know, is it's enormous. So, and the little balcony spaces, spill out spaces might prove to be really popular, I think, as Ellie also touched on. And how would you keep that consistent and clean if it is that spill out space from the sleeping pod area? So therefore, I think lounges and those types of spaces will be extremely popular. So maybe some of the plan could have catered towards that, and maybe with the demountable, I assume the pods are demountable, or that they're mobile. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think if they could be moved around and lounges brought in and kind of cater to spaces when they're not at capacity might have been another kind of scenario that could be explored. But that's again future proofing, and just as the space would potentially get used, you'd probably change it up depending on how it was used as well. So great that it's all flexible, but beautiful renders. Yeah, really well done. I think with Job Warehouse, I love the finishes. I think it's really inviting, and from the street front, I think it's a really beautiful kind of inviting space. You would feel comfortable going in there. And just out of interest from the street front, you'd probably want to enter the space and engage with it, given that it is that kind of warm, inviting interior. So really well done on the finishes there, very neutral. I wonder whether some kind of softer seating and lounges might have been something to consider within the space as well, just to give it that additional feeling of comfort potentially, but appreciating that it's a dining area, and it's probably best to use some lighter finishes and keep it quite clean, or products that are easier to clean. But really beautifully kind of put together. And again, it's such an inviting space. I'm just checking my notes while I'm jabbering on. I love the dining under the clouds. I think that's a really nice concept as well. I wonder whether you could have incorporated, or maybe it's a potential to some of the gallery walls that you talked about up on level 1, and whether that could be brought, some of that art and opportunity for exhibition could be brought down onto the ground floor plane to allow further kind of engagement with the street front. So that was just a comment that I made here as well. Yeah, and I just love the lighting and I guess the way that you've, really kind of, the renders kind of really, well, for me, they spoke to various levels of lighting throughout the space as well, which is always really important and kind of always, yeah, really makes the space, I guess, the most comfortable, which is, I think, what you were trying to achieve on that ground floor plane. So, yeah, they were kind of all my comments generally, but really, again, well done and, yeah, fantastic presentation.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. I think that was, sorry, I can't actually see your faces anymore while I'm sharing. But, yeah, thank you so much for your comments, and it's definitely, I guess, for thought, we're always going to be thinking about these projects. I think it was such a special project that kind of engaged a lot of thinking, so the planning and the thinking doesn't really stop here and stop today. So thank you.
Okay. You going to, yeah. We've still got Dennis to come. He's going to. Yeah, he's not just sitting in. He actually is going to make a few comments on your work, Emily.
Hi, Emily.
Hi. I'm so sorry. I completely blanked because you were sitting with Karen. I just remember the 3.
That's all right. It was a lovely presentation you gave. From experience years ago, the Rialto is an extraordinarily difficult building to deal with in any event. I like what you've done. I have a few queries. Just the distance between the pods and so on in relation to cleaning and that sort of stuff practically could be an issue, but look, it's a minor issue. And your space outside the pods is good. And this, I'm not sure that I'd divide them up into single and double. That's just a personal thing. I kind of like the idea of an inclusive mix, if you like. But look, practically, you're probably right and I'm probably wrong. But the materials and the design of pods, which are terribly tight, the whole brief is for tightness and just a place to sleep. What you've done spatially within those pods, I think is terrific, and the way they can open up and close and relate to one another is good. I love the colours you've used. They're calming, tranquil. I think you've done a really good job with that. And going to the second building, if you can just show it to me again. And everybody approaches this building in a different way. But I really like what you've done in making it light, bright, optimistic, if you like, in these times, which is not easy to do. It's welcoming. It has, you've shown outside, you've got tree leaves there and doors opening out and so on. Like all that, I think it's a very welcoming space, and what you've done with it would be commercially successful, which is the whole idea of what you've done, I guess. I'm not going to say too much more because I agree with what the others have said entirely. What are your intentions in the future?
That's a really great question. I definitely entered this course thinking I would be more of a residential designer, but coming through to the end now, I've really solidly enjoyed commercial work. So I think leaving from this, I do intend to study my Bachelor of Interior Architecture next year, but definitely I want to start exploring working within commercial interiors. That's my foreseeable future.
Do it. I mean, we all find our place in the world and so on. And your take on, and particularly on the warehouse, which I just think it's a lovely, welcoming place, full of light, full of brightness, a money maker. That's the name of the game, to support the other. Good on you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Emily. That was that was really great. Any other comments anybody wants to make, or is there any further questions you've got, Emily, that you want to ask?
I think I'm pretty good. Yeah, I really valued all of the feedback that you all have given, because I guess there's always another perspective to these things, and it's definitely a lot more to think about.
Excellent, yeah. I mean, it is really interesting how 4 people can have 4 different perceptions on the one work. And it's also a really important lesson for you that you have to, 1, take criticism, that's life, but also 2, that what you perceive when you're designing something will be, once you put it out in the public realm, it changes. It's everybody else's perceptions, and you have to let go of your babies. Okay, right. Thanks very much, Emily.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Right, Despina.
Hello.
Oh, there you are. You've gone up that corner. Hi. We will, if you will start with your floor plans of the hotel first, please.
Of course. All right. I think. Oops. Can you see that one?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Am I ready to get going? Can you guys hear me and all that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was given obviously the Intercontinental. So just here is my floor plan. As you come in, I have my reception over here, followed by the waiting room, the storage area, then the mail area. With my sleeping pods, I've created 2 spaces for the rooms. So this one is for smaller families, for instance, a parent and a child, or a parent and 2 children. Over here is the larger sleeping pod areas for a family of 4. So that one there's my floor plan. So I'll take you guys over to now my portfolio. So as this is obviously a borrowed building, this space, it was really important to remember that what we're designing is quite temporary, and the whole deinstitutionalizing institutions. So my client, as I said before, so I really wanted to make sure that I was catering for all ages, not just adults, but the children as well. So with my pods, I really got inspired by the circle, just with the forms and the curves of it. I thought it was a lot more free flowing and just not as intense compared to like a square with the pointy and sharp edges. So this here is my sleeping pod I have designed. I have a double bed on the bottom and 2 singles up the top, which is supported by a plywood base. As you can see here, which I'll show you in my spec sheets in a second, the details of it, there's just 4 little steps up to the top bunk here. And as I said, they sleep 4 people. The pod itself is made out of fiberglass. So it's a double layer of fiberglass with insulation in the middle to keep it warm. And there is an MDF base to support the pod, just because this is a circle, it'll go rolling around if it doesn't have that base. Yeah, and just with the color palette, I've gone for a charcoal color with a white interior, and every 3rd one is red, just to sort of bring a bit of formality into it. Just as these people, they're coming from such a harsh lifestyle, not having permanent accommodation, I just wanted something, as much as they feel comfortable, somewhere where they can really sort of kickstart and get back on track in that sense. And then throughout my space, to create a bit of unity, I've repeated that circle element. So for instance, here in my reception desk design, as this is where you first enter, the circles are here. And just in the furniture, so smooth and curved edges, like a circle coffee table, and so on. This render here is just of my mail room, so just nice and simple for that one there. If I scroll down, this is just a blown up axle of my space, as you can see, as I showed you in my floor plan just before. Yeah, and so this here is my spec sheets for my pod. So a little feature I have just to add a bit of character to the pod is this tilted face.
Can you zoom that a little, zoom up a little into this sheet? Yeah, terrific.
Yeah. Did you want me to go into like a specific area or just as a whole? Yeah, so this one here, I'll sort of go like this. So this is just the plan view looking down. So yeah, as I said, this is the tilted face, so it just comes out 100 mil, and you can see a little bit better here. It's not sitting flat, so yeah, that is there. And here is just the top bed base, so it's 900 from the ground, and so it's just these steps on the side aren't necessarily like a ladder, it's just more some little steps, just because you can't necessarily get to the top, you need some steps to help you up. And as I said, this here is my MDF base to help support the pod. It does start halfway through just because I didn't want that to be a main feature when you're looking at the pod, so it's just kind of hidden and out of the way. And just looking at the front on here, yeah, so that one is my pod. And if I just scroll down, that is just a long section. So here's the sleeping pod room with all of them lined up. And here is just my materials board. So the existing flooring is in each timber and a lot of it is brick walls. So I've just included those here. And then the materials in my pod, as I said, they were fiberglass. So I have the charcoal fiberglass and the white and red. So that one is my site A. I'll take you guys over into my site B now. So with the site B, it's Job Warehouse located on Burke Street, and we needed to create like a social enterprise business model. So in my space on the ground floor, I've put in a restaurant and an op shop, and in the upstairs room, I have my function room and a yoga space. As you can see through these renders here, I will come back to these renders. I just go through my floor plan with you guys first. So just over here is my ground floor plan. I've decided to create an open plan design, just sort of to encourage the users to use both spaces. So here is a restaurant. So for instance, they're sitting down for a meal or a coffee. They see something in the op shop, and so they go over to the op shop, or if they're in the op shop, they want to grab a coffee on their way through. So just to create a bit of like a talking point between both spaces, and as I said, to encourage them to use both. Over here to my first floor, I have my function room. So I have two function rooms, but this is a dividing wall that'll open up to one bigger space to accommodate for larger groups. And just here is my yoga and meditation space. Through my research, I actually found that there weren't many yoga spaces throughout the city. And I thought this was really important to include, especially with COVID-19 and mental health, it's such a big thing. So I thought this was really important for people to use. And here I have a changing room and showers for the yoga space and just some toilets for the full first floor. So this is just some axos and a section of my space. So the bar back here, some side seating, and this is through to the upstairs. And just a materials board. So I've put oak flooring throughout the whole space just to bring some warmth in. I really wanted to create like a dreamy, airy kind of feeling throughout my space. So a lot of it is white walls, and I've repeated the same three colors, this light blue, pink, and yellow. I thought those pastel colors really complemented each other nicely, especially once they've been repeated throughout the design a couple times. And to add a bit of texture, I have these rattan screens, which I'll go back up to my renders so I can show you those. So this here is just where like those rattan screens are, so through to the op shop back there. And so this is a daytime of my restaurant, and this is sort of a nighttime evening shot. And just up here is my yoga space. I've tried to sort of tie it back into the op shop and downstairs, although they are two separate spaces. So elements like the green yoga mats are subject to whoever actually moves into that space. Yeah, so they are my site A and my site B.
Thanks, Christina. That was good. Christina, would you like to start?
Yes, I will. Yeah. Hi, Despina. Can we call you Desi?
Oh, yes, sorry, I go by Desi, that's fine.
Okay, I just saw it now on your sheet.
Yeah.
Great presentation, really well spoken, very kind of clear and concise. So thank you. I think if we started with the first site, sorry to make you kind of flick through it all.
Would you like the technical drawings or just the portfolio?
I think that, yeah, that's fine. This image is fine, actually. Yeah. So I really like the way that you brought in, I guess, the circle pods. I think that's it's an interesting approach in your kind of description around the free flowing and using that kind of organic language throughout the reception desk and then through to the furniture and then the pods. I think that's a really nice flow. Because more often than not, furniture doesn't tend to reflect some of the other spaces in parts of interior design. So I like that you've carried that all the way through. I think sorry, excuse me.
That's okay.
I like the colours that you've used as well, and you've got the raw brickwork that is the Intercontinental, the existing brick finishes, and you've used that really well throughout the space. I think that's it's got the building's got beautiful bones as it is, and it's really nice to see a lot of that as your backdrop, and then the rest of the finishes are quite minimal and really kind of respect the brickwork. So I love that. I love your finishes selection there. Catering for all ages, always really, really hard. And I think you've done that quite well. Just wondering in terms of, I guess the children aspect and I guess, areas for them to be able to kind of spill out onto and have a bit more space. Whether you thought about that at all, or
Yeah.
I know it's a tricky one to answer because it's hard to cater for all ages and families.
Yeah, I can show you over here on my floor plan. So here is a sleeping pod area. And this space here I've designated to like a family sort of area.
Okay.
Also out here on the terrace, I've added just some seating arrangements just outside the pods so people can mix and mingle there, and children can also just play with each other and that kind of element there. So this is here more of a lounge area. This is sort of some dining table, like some more formal seating. And yeah, this here is just some little seating arrangements.
Fantastic. Yeah, that lounge area is going to be really super popular, I guess, for the spillover space from the pod. So that's great. Fantastic. And I think just if we flick to, the other thing that I really liked as well was the hidden support. If you can go to your section detail.
Yes.
Just how you kind of described the base and it being kind of tucked away so you could focus on the circles, I thought was a really nice touch. And great little details as well, the way that it's being presented. I thought the scale and those kind of finite details in terms of construction and the base was quite good or the way that you described it was really good.
Thank you.
Checking through my notes. Softer, like that everything's kind of softer and organic. I've spoken about that already. Yeah, fantastic. And I think you could flick through to Job Warehouse.
Yep.
Firstly, I loved the day-night renders. I think that's it's always really nice to see the same space in different lighting used at different times of the day, and they look like completely different spaces, which is a fantastic result. Very light and pastel kind of during the day, and then quite dark and moody at night. So well done. I think that's it's a really good, approach to showing two different times of the day. I love the pastel colours and the lightness that you've used as well. I think that again, exudes kind of warmth and comfort and an inviting space, which is fantastic. And also, I think there was, if you could go to the plans as well for the ground floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you've got, I mean, obviously the op shop and the restaurant next to each other, and your little kind of apertures and, you know, views to the other spaces. I think that's really important. That's the best way for users to, you know, whilst they're dining, etc., they can see things while they're in a seated position. I think you've done that really well, and it will certainly activate that space or create interest for you to want to go over and purchase things. But yeah, all in all, really, really well done. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Karen, you're on mute.
Ali, would you like to go next?
Oh, sure, Karen. Yes, you're one talented student, I have to say, or Desi. If we go to the Rialto, to the Intercontinental, yes, to this scheme. Now, I really very much enjoyed this design, and you've obviously worked really hard. There's some interesting, it's very cohesive as an aesthetic, and there's also a sensibility to materiality that I've appreciated in the sense that you haven't just forgotten the way that building has a lot of brickwork and all that, but you've actually used it and adopted that language, but then have made it your own. And I very much commend you for that. One thing that puzzles me, and this is not specifically in your scheme, but all of the schemes, is that these pods, I understand that you're doing pods for people, and they all remind me a little bit of, especially this one, of the Japanese, I forget the name of the type of hotels that
sleeping capsules.
Yeah, that's right, the sleeping capsules. They remind me of those things, and I worry a little bit about how I mean, they're designed usually for men, single people who have missed the train and have to stay in the city after work. It worries me a little bit how these things are very small. Like, I wonder, this is the only space they have, the private space they have for getting dressed, undressed, for doing things. How are they going to move around that space when there's only 900 mil, from what I understand, in your sections? 900 mil of head height between one bed and the other, sort of the underside of another bed. Those sorts of things kind of, and this is, don't take it personally, the more you show people and the more there is, and the better the scheme is, in a sense, there's more to talk about. So, take these comments as a compliment, not as a...
With the 900 mil, that is just, if I go to my sections, I can show you here, that is just from the base to this top bunk, but the pod as a whole is 2.3 meters. So in this little area here is some standing room.
Right, but how wide is that standing room area?
I'm not sure if I have it on there. I believe it is 300 this way and 500 this way, I'm pretty sure.
These days you'll be really pushed to find a person that's only 300 mil wide.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is the only place they have to kind of get dressed, undressed, talk to, dress the kids, do all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Making it a little bit deeper. And I know you've had constraints with the space overall because you're working in an existing space, but just be careful of those sorts of things. Really, I encourage all the students to measure things and actually have bits of paper on the ground when they're designing something that actually are the same measurement of the spaces they're designed, because it's often very deceptive. A drawing can make things look, spacious, when in fact you can't, they're not spacious enough to be practical. But look, I've really enjoyed this this design. And as I said, you've got great sensibility to materials, and you've developed the ideas, you know, fairly, you know, a long way. So there's more to discuss in your scheme, in a sense. So don't feel offended by me saying that.
No.
And then the job warehouse scheme. I really, if you go to the plan, I always like seeing plans.
Yep.
I very much like what you've done there. I mean, some other students have taken the cellular nature of the space to heart. I mean, I noticed that you've taken all the walls down on the ground, but they've kept them on the first floor. Mostly you'd probably want to do it the other way around, just structurally. But
Yeah.
But I'm encouraged by the fact that you've got some structural grid lines on the ground, and then you've considered that, considered the opening up of the space in you know, structurally. I really like the way you've put the stairs at the rear so that they're discreet and they can service all 3 tenancies upstairs, or whatever the spaces are upstairs, and that flexibility is, as I remarked in previous schemes, a very important thing. So well done, it's terrific.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm pleased that you picked up on those grid lines, because that was one of the problems that a few students had, Ali, of being allowed to actually take down walls, but then forgetting that they actually had to hold up the first floor. So it's a learning curve. Now I'm going to put Dennis on next, and then David, you can finish off. So yeah, okay, thank you.
You need to click me on darling or on
Oh,
mute.
didn't you get?
That's it. You're right now.
Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Christina. Okay, can I go back to the first building, please?
Yes, of course.
That top image to me is lovely. The curve is calming, tranquil, and the forms themselves offer a sense of peace and tranquility, which I think in any event is really good, and individual thinking. I agree with Ellie that when you're doing we're dealing with such volumes in small spaces, it's very critical to think of anthropometrics, i.e. the measurements around the human body and movement, and ergonomics, which how the body moves within the spaces. But I think I really like the rhythm that you've created. I like the colours that you've created. And that idea in itself, I think, is worthy of great praise, as is your presentation, by the way. Materials, I wonder about fiberglass, but look, that's just an energy thing. When you use materials today, we need to think of the embodied energy that we're using, toxicities of materials and things like that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, look, fiberglass is something that you can punch out. They could be moulded repetitively, and the repetition there and the simplicity of that fundamental structure is good. So I really like that in every way, and just viewing the natural brickwork within the building is terrific. Now, can I have a look at the next building, please?
The side B?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I go to plans, please?
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, I agree with what the previous speaker said, Ellie said about opening up the space and allowing for structure, and that the whole space downstairs is inviting. Anybody passing the building would look in, and I like also the density of the seating, but the spaces between the gallery, if you like, that goes around the building and around the seating. it's very inviting. And having that, looking over that to what is on the other side, which is the retail section, as I understand it, I think it's a great idea. That's downstairs. While the stairs remote down at the back, and that's, you know, a nice idea putting it there, from a regulatory point of view, it probably wouldn't be permitted. I'm not certain on that, but there are distances from stairs that we need to understand for access around buildings and fire safety, essentially. They're things you'll learn in the future. But
Yeah.
Can you go on to some interiors of this building, please?
Of the existing ones or my renders?
More renderings, please.
Oh, yes, my renders.
Simple, lovely, calming, yoga, great idea. And the circles on the wall just soften everything again. It's bringing the curve in. And curves are really lovely. You know, your first job, and I'm just going backwards here in my talking to the previous job, but the rhythm that you've got with the curve there reminds one of the old Nissan huts that, I don't know whether you know them, they were old huts cast.
Not sure if I do know.
No. Just, again, it was a soft economic form made with corrugated iron for migrants and so on. But the softness of the curve produces the tranquility. The softness of the circle equals tranquility. The yoga mats spread out, well, that's peace. And look at the nice softness of, again, of the balls in the background. The what you call them, balls, you know what I mean.
Exercise balls, yeah.
Those balls. Just let me look at everything else. I think, look, all of that's very inviting. Well done. I mean, and what do you think? What are your plans for the future?
I hope to be able to start working with a firm and just sort of, I know as much as I'm very proud of my work, I know I still have a lot of ways I can improve. So I just hope I can just sort of expose myself to more and just gain more ideas and, yeah, just slowly build up my career, I guess.
Yeah, well, you see, that's where you're clever, I think, with those curves. Nobody's done that. We've seen boxes and rectangles and so on. Your idea of the curve and cylinder introduces that emphasis, that character of tranquility and calmness, which I think is a really innovative thought for calming for people in such conditions.
Yeah.
Going into the future, it's good to think as you think, which was laterally. You weren't making up boxes side by side. You were thinking, how can I make this? I'm going to make this mine. Yeah. You've done that. Just keep on doing it. And the best of luck.
Okay, that was good, Despina. The last person is going to be David Vernon.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, Desi. Thank you for that. If I just comment on the Intercontinental.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very taken by what I really liked. I think I agree with the comments that have been made. I think there's a strong language of these replicable pods that you have, and I really like the way in which you've arranged them too, because each of them have their own outlook. They're not facing in on each other, and it's quite strong. And I think it's great from an aesthetic point of view that you've brought the brickwork and the elements of the old building into it. So I particularly like that view on the first page of your images on the bottom right there, and then you've used it again in each of the other, again the remnants of the old brick coming through, which I think is a really strong aspect of it. I would agree. I think the thing that it obviously invites criticism then to look at your pods, and it's really just a matter of for you to develop your technical expertise to think about, the choice of fiberglass or just the structural nature of the material you're working with, if it is practical to do it that way. For someone who's slightly taller, I found a problem looking at your plans and the scale and size from an ergonomics. So I think, as Ellie suggested, you really mark out, use a bit of masking tape on a floor and think of all people come in different size and shapes, and how that could work. But I think you could work through it. I think there's enough space there to make that work. It's such a strong idea, and there are examples of this. I think there's a sleeping arrangements like this in California that use a sort of tube. They might even use concrete, so they were slightly more permanent external structures. But there's things to draw on and look at other examples, and then incorporate your own and strengthen your own thoughts and ideas, and to make it a more competent scheme. It's certainly competent in terms of your planning and how that works. And I do like the fact that you had that lounge area that was quite practical, so that people can be sleeping and there's other activities in other areas, and using the balcony areas as well. So I think that's important, because you're dealing with families as well as smaller family units or individuals, or it's essentially families. So, well done on that. I think there's a lot of good decisions in there, and I think more your technical expertise that you develop to be a competent scheme. For the jobs warehouse, I think, your presentation, I was more taken, clearly the decision to open it up poses some technical issues structurally, but I found particularly that image on your first page on the bottom right with those chairs and the screening between the two really nicely. There's a nice delicacy to it, and I think that's and a sensitivity to it that's really nice and calming. The use of for the yoga room upstairs. There's some questions there that will come. I think that's developing your experience and expertise, and thinking about those sort of decisions about the stairs and circulation and so forth. Yeah. Whether a coffee point needs to be towards the front rather than at just the restaurant and bar at the back. But there's a really nice sense of sensitivity to your spaces that I think I found alluring. And yes, the idea of thinking about this facility both during the day and an evening time is important. So it's good to introduce that, to think that yes, the mood can change, and there's a strong idea that you're carrying right through. So I think that's a really important thing. You've got those ideas, that you develop them and you can test them, and then strengthen your scheme and your presentation accordingly. So well done.
Thank you.
Oh, pretty positive stuff, Desi.
Yeah.
Okay. You got any questions before we finish up your session?
I don't.
Okay. Anybody got any final comments for Desi?
I do. I was just going to make a suggestion, just while we wait for Taylor, who's coming up next. I was going to suggest, Desi, that I know maybe this year has been really quite full on, having to learn remotely. All of that obviously is going to change, hopefully very soon, sometime next year. I was going to suggest that maybe what you will need to do is, rather than looking for work, to maybe further your studies. And I feel that with the positive comments that you received from our guests, that the experience that you're looking for may not necessarily be obtained working, because working as a graduate, you'll find that you'll be doing really mundane stuff where it's obviously everything goes towards your experience, but sometimes working in, it depends where you work, but working for big offices, you'll find that you'll maybe arranging the library, for example, like a samples library, you'll be doing stuff like that, or maybe just maybe documenting, whether on Revit or AutoCAD, toilet blocks, so, or something along those lines. And I know all of this will obviously go towards your experience that's going to be really helpful. And if you were working for a smaller company, you might end up being the receptionist slash, graduate slash something else.
Yeah.
I feel like the experience that you're looking for will actually happen in a lot of the studios that we unfortunately can't provide in a PAVE environment, but you'll definitely get in a bachelor environment.
Yeah.
A studio type, if we're talking about either interior, the Bachelor of Interior Design or Bachelor of Architecture, you get a lot of that studio time where, like this, exactly what you've experienced today is what you will experience in a proper studio. And you'll get a lot of that, the bouncing of ideas from some of your peers, where you put up all these presentations, and then at the end of the semester you'll have a panel of guests who will also be critiquing your work. I do strongly feel that that's how you will get the experience that you're after, not at work. I certainly didn't get that as a graduate, and I've worked for multiple firms, many firms around Melbourne, because I unfortunately got caught in the GFC cycle, very vicious cycle. So I think rather than hoping to get the experience at work, I would say that you're guaranteed the experience if you go back to uni. I feel like that's definitely where you'll get what you're after, and it's guaranteed. That's mine. So I just really want to encourage you.
Yeah, no,
It is interesting. Sorry, it is interesting that the government is pushing that all our courses have to be job orientated, and yet the advanced diploma, they're trying to get rid of it because it's seen as a luxury in order to get a job. Whereas I agree with everything that Kathleen's saying. Get further education to actually substantiate your talents that you have, Desi. It sort of we're going through an incredible time where people are not really respecting education long term, and we need people who can think. And so, I agree with everything that Kathleen's saying, even though in a way it is the opposite to what our actual employment is supposed to be about. So, yeah.
These days too, Karen, I don't think we have to think in such a binary way either, Desi, because like in our office, for example, we employ a number of undergraduates, and they get a bit of the best of both worlds. They're still studying, and they're also getting into experience part-time. So that's another option, isn't it, Karen? If you can.
That's the ultimate, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you definitely have the ability to get into a Bachelor of Architecture or bachelor course. It's whether you're interested in that, or you want to get some experience first, and then sometimes that's also defines, having a little break and having a bit of practical experience defines more clearly to you what your interest area is, and that could be useful too. But like I said, you don't have to choose one or the other. A lot of people are working at, it's hard. It's a hard road. I'm not I'm not suggesting that it's an easy thing to do, because you have to split your time between work and but if you find the right employer that understands how people can work flexibly and still be engaged with the studio, then you could certainly try that road as well.
Yeah,
I think that's spot on. If you've got a job, you can get a job.
That's right.
If you haven't got a job, and no matter how bright you are, it's very hard to get a job. But the combination of practical and study is the best combination, because you know, you work and you bring it back into your own work, and the combination makes you the best employee. And you know, I think about architecture because that's the ultimate. To be an architect is the ultimate. It doesn't.
So you're on dangerous ground there, Dennis. Given the audience.
And, you know, but in this new world which we're part of now, every day is a different day, and I think there's going to be great scope for thinkers in the near future. From now on, it's you know, I think collaboration will be an essential part of practice wherever you fit in. But just looking at what you've shown us today, you've got the ability to think innovatively and make new things for the new world. And, you know.
Yeah, I think the reason why I made that suggestion is because I think that I guess exactly what you're saying with the innovation that can be further nurtured in the right environment, which would be, I believe, at uni. And look, I think just doing both interior design and architecture, I know that I absolutely love uni life. I really enjoyed those years of my life. I also, because I did get to be mentored or tutored by, you know, the key figures of, you know, of architecture and we have so many amazing architects in Melbourne, really so many. I mean, you know, you're around them now. So you never know if you go to either RMIT or Melbourne Uni, that you will actually be mentored by some of these architects who you'd only read about in architecture books or magazines. But sorry, I'm not going to go on any more about this because we do have Taylor just waiting. So Taylor, do you want to begin your presentation? Maybe start with your floor plan.
Thank
and
you.
take us through your work.
Thanks, Desi.
Okay, bye, Desi.
Thanks, Desi. Thank you, Desi.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor. I'll just share my screen. Okay, are we good to go? Can you see my screen? Yep, perfect. So my site A was the Intercontinental Hotel. I'll start with my floor plan. So can you see my cursor?
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
we can.
All good. Okay. So the Intercontinental, the main challenge in designing this space was probably to design to fit the space, as it is a borrowed building. So in my design, we have 4 main areas. So we've got the reception area, which is just in the bottom right-hand corner here. So you've got the main entrance either through the staircase or the elevators here. Then you've got the sleeping pods, which I've split up into 2 areas. So you've got the small sleeping pod area at the bottom here, and then up the top you've got the large sleeping pod area. Then we've got the lockers, which I've also done 2 separate areas. So you've got the small pod locker area and then the large pod lockers. And then we've got the services and support here, which I've sort of broken up into some little office spaces, which you'll see. And I've also just used the balcony along the atrium as like communal lounge areas, just because our users of the space are families. So I feel like it's sort of really important to create the sense of community and sort of bring everyone together so they can use that space if they would like to. I'll move on to my folio. So these are my final renders of the space. I'll discuss my design for the sleeping pod further down when I get to the spec sheet. But basically, my idea for my design was to try and keep it quite playful and warm and welcoming. As I said, we do have families using the space, so you want to sort of steer away from that, I guess, institutional feel. So I've used some colors through my materials and stuff just to sort of warm it up a little bit as well. You can see in this axo here how the space sort of works together. So that's like the main reception area and then the sleeping pods. I have blocked off a side. I've put little partition walls in so you can sort of just access the rooms from one point, because there are a lot of doors and sort of entry points and exit points throughout the space. So I've tried to sort of keep it as clear and easy to navigate as possible as well. It's my floor plan. So this is my sleeping pod broken down into the spec sheet. So I have two different types of sleeping pods. They're pretty much the exact same. The only difference is the size. So the small sleeping pod, they fit 2 people and they're basically the size of a single bunk. So 2 beds and then a little bit of storage space, just because I feel like families, they need that extra little bit of privacy compared to if it was just a single person sleeping in the pod. The pod is made of fiberglass, and I've used these detailed panels just to sort of create ventilation through the space. And I've also mimicked that same design on the inside, which is used as a ladder to get up to the top bunk. This front panel here with the number on it, that's a sliding panel, so it can be closed for privacy. And then as you can see in this elevation here, the front screen is that detailed panel. So there's still light coming through and there's still ventilation. It's just sort of more private than it being all open. And then we have my materials. So because the Intercontinental is a borrowed space, we've kept a lot of the materials. So the walls, which is a brick wall, the flooring, which we had a marble tile through the reception area, and then we just had floorboards throughout the rest of the space. And then you've got my fiberglass colors. So I've chosen like a light grey fiberglass for the majority of the shells and the interior. And then I've used this green and this blue just to sort of create some color and contrast and just add a little bit of something to the pods as well. And that's it for site A. I'll move on to site B now. So I'll start with my floor plan. So there's 3 main areas for the job warehouse site. It's the op shop, which I've included a cafe as well, sort of like a coffee bar, a restaurant on the other side of the ground floor, and then the first floor, I've sort of proposed it as this multifunctional space. So you've got like a common area, you've got some meeting rooms which can be rented out for private use or for work groups or whoever. And then I've got 2 rec rooms of the same size, so they can be used for exercise classes, private events, anything. I sort of wanted to create like a real sense of community in this space because it is, our clients are the Salvation Army. So I wanted them to have sort of, like multifunctional, can be used for different purposes. I've also got some bathrooms along the back here and a kitchenette and storage area. So I'll go into my folio. Okay, so these are my final renders for my job warehouse site. Up the top here, you've got a view from the restaurant. So I wanted to choose materials for this space that sort of contrasted the outside of the building. So I wanted to use quite polished materials, as the exterior of the building is sort of quite run down. I wanted to create a point of difference. So I've used pastels. We've kept the existing floor in here, which is just like a light concrete, which is repolished. You'll see further down in my materials board that I've used like a terrazzo tile for the bar. And then I've got this green tiled feature wall that sort of runs along the back as well. In the bottom left-hand corner, you've got a small render of my op shop space. My idea for that was to keep it quite clean and contemporary. I know that a lot of product going into op shops isn't always like that. You sort of can't really choose what you get. I wanted to keep the space clean just to sort of, not take away from the product that's going into it, I guess. And then on the right-hand side, I've just got a view of my booth seating in the restaurant as well. So I've used the gold accents throughout the restaurant space, and then I've used black accents throughout the op shop space. There's an AXO that sort of explains it a little bit better as well. And my materials here. So these are the materials. This was the terrazzo tile that I was talking about, and the green. I've then used some pink and whites to sort of brighten it up. So it is quite light and bright. And yeah, that's all.
Ali, do you want to start?
Oh, sure. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
So, Taylor, thanks for the presentation. If you go back to perhaps the Intercontinental and the pods that you've designed, we can talk about those first. Okay, so that image, yeah, that's fine. Now, actually go to the plan of that scheme first. So what I've enjoyed in your presentation is the plan of the overall plan. I mean, the way you've arranged those pods along the main space. What I think, and one comment that's been that came through this morning, is what story do you want to tell when you're, we're, in a way, as designers, we're storytellers. I mean, we're not storytellers in the sense of telling a story with words, but we tell stories with images, and therefore you need to sort of have in your head the kind of story you want to say. You want the story you want to tell with your work, and what why I'm saying that is that the iconography, so the image you present, is a very important aspect of every design. I think your pods are very well designed, and there's a lot of thought that's gone in, and are probably one of the the more practical ones that we've seen so far. You've allowed quite a bit of space inside the pod for people to dress, undress, do all those sorts of things. And I mean, I can't read your dimensions terribly well because of the screen size, but I can see there's a lot of room a lot more room than some of the other schemes that we've seen so far. But I question the use of those big numbers. I can understand that you want to be playful, and I appreciate you've introduced a playful colour scheme. But the big numbers in a project where often people are treated as numbers is perhaps something you really need to be careful with. And by all means, talk to others when when you have ideas. Exchange information, exchange opinion with other people, especially people that have perhaps experience these situations themselves, and they will probably steer you towards sort of an appropriate iconography. Having said that, I do enjoy the amount of work you put into this scheme. There's a lot of good thoughts in the scheme, and some real sensitivity to materials. So well done.
Thank you.
In terms of the job warehouse, you've probably had less time perhaps to develop that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess I sort of spent so much time on these pods that, yeah, I didn't have as much time, or I didn't leave myself with as much time to develop the job warehouse.
Yeah, that's okay. But maybe you can go to those drawings if it's not too hard.
Yeah, the renders or the plan, or
just the plan. The renders are you've done. I commend you for sort of changing materials and trying to develop the palette of materials with varying types of materials. Perhaps if you go to the plans, we can talk about those in more detail.
yeah.
Yeah, what I would say with that, I think it's very good that you've thought through the idea of mobility and accessibility. So the lifts are an important aspect of that, you know, making it a universally accessible space. You're probably going overboard using 2 lifts, but I can appreciate the sentiment there of, you know, having a certain amount of redundancy in case one breaks down and you can use the other. I would watch how much space you allow for circulation. I mean, typically our clients, and this is in the big bad world of commerciality, only allows, allow something like 83% efficiency. So if you're between 10 and 20% of circulation, you're probably hitting the right spot. If you've got more than that in usable space, more than that in corridor space, then you're really sacrificing too much usable space. And that's, look, a very, hard-nosed commercial advice I'm giving you there, but just watch that in the future. And also on the ground floor, I don't know why you would sacrifice so much street frontage to a reception area. I mean, given that you've got pretty much self-sufficient businesses like a restaurant on one side and an op shop on the other, I don't think you need to have that reception as well. That reception could perhaps happen on less commercially valuable space, which would be the top floor. That's just, again, a bit of hard-nosed reality.
Yeah. No, thank you for the feedback.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, David, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Taylor. If we jump to the Intercontinental, I would share many of the comments that Ali has made. I think, yes, there is, it's always good to get people's impressions. So the idea of using numbers and super graphic is a strong idea, but it's, it has some issues potentially given the nature of the clientele. And I would perhaps think the same of following through your palette, that it might have a little bit more variance in it. I think we saw a previous scheme just before. It's great that, on speaking of the aesthetic, that you've introduced or recognised the existing building fabric and the red brick and following it through. I can see a very competent. I could see this working, and the notion of the detail you've gone into with your pods and these arrangements with these locker areas, these good breakout communal lounge spaces. I think it's just the question of the reception, whether it should be remote from a services and support area or vice versa, but it's quite competent the way in which you've got these things working. And And that leads to the jobs warehouse, where I think I would agree that, yep, in this environment, about giving up such an area off Burke Street frontage to a reception area is perhaps, yeah, it is questionable, especially when it leads to then a sort of a dead end space in that restaurant. But you've treated it interestingly with these sort of different treatments for these booth type or semi-booth scalloped wall detail. So there's some nice features in there potentially, but whether that is actually the best space with the existing building and creating these sort of dead end space poses some problems. But as look overall, I think there's some good touches to it, and particularly I think the renders, the second one, and I think are quite convincing and quite competent. So I think it's more a question of, as we saw in an earlier scheme just before, working on your technical skills, developing your experience, and thinking through a little bit further with some of your ideas. Certainly would help you. So those sort of critical decisions that you make, you always need to test them. So I think with the jobs warehouse one, that decision to go with the double lift and putting it in such a prominent spot sets up these other issues that you need to resolve. And sometimes you need to have to be prepared to go back and review that and think, oh, is there a better way I can rework it? So that would be what I would just suggest. But otherwise, thank you. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Dennis is going to speak to you now. Taylor?
No worries.
Hi, Taylor.
Hello.
I've got to find you. No, I don't find you. I find your drawings. Could I have a look at the first scheme, please?
Sure.
Or plans? Yeah.
The plan?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got pods up the top, outside recreation, atrium, entry, and smaller and larger. And what was I looking at? I was looking at something before, locker rooms or something like that. Were they there?
Yeah, you've got your large lockers up the top here towards the left, and then the small lockers.
Yeah, I was wondering about the small locker room. Is an awfully small room. You know, maybe you could have created a better space, people bumping into one another and so on, might not be so good.
Yeah.
Now, if we could go to some visuals of the pods, please.
This one?
Yeah. Now, tell me what I'm looking at up top. I'm looking at green diagonals. Are they light? Is that lighting or?
Yeah, so there's strip lighting on the inside of the pods, and that's what's come through in the renders as well. That's the light coming through.
Green transparency. Is that structural or is it just? It's a door. It's a door.
This one?
Well, no, it's okay. If I look at number 7, I think I understand. I just trying to read the drawings actually, and I was just having a little difficulty. But I thought the zigzags on, doesn't matter what I thought. I was wrong. Reading your drawings wrongly. Look, your use of space and the planning internally, I think, is really good.
Thank you.
Some of the best that one of the best we've seen. You've got space to move around beside the beds and to climb from above, from below to above, space to do things. That's good.
Thank you.
Thought of it or ergonomically, you thought of it really well. One of the best of everybody's thinking. Colours and so on. Can you just take me through it slowly and I'll talk to it again? Just go forward with your presentation from where we are, if you could, please.
So would you like me to go down to the sleeping pod
there.
station?
Just go back up a bit. Yeah, just to the room on the left up top. The lockers. Lockers, nice colours, nice presentation. And you've got some greenery in there.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Yeah. No, there's green.
In the render here?
Yeah. Is that a little bit of greenery up top?
Yeah, I've added some planter boxes on top of the lockers.
I think that's a nice idea.
Thank you.
Greenery is always good to have. So your colour patterning is lovely and peaceful, good colours. Reception, yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, it looks like a bit like a flash hotel. I think it's a little overdone, and the same with the lifts. The idea of having a lift's terrific, but I don't think you need more than, you know, so, one lift. Just go on a bit further, please. We go to the next building, perhaps.
The job warehouse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Show me the plans clearly, just up a bit. That's it. Yeah, this is a commercial building, and I think what you've missed out on is that fact that it's commercial. It's to make money. You've got a lot of space that any prospective developer would probably say, what are you doing with all this waste space? You know, you need to, in a cafe, cram people in, which is a social thing as well as a money-making thing. That's just something to keep in your mind. Whenever you're dealing with commercial work, at the end of the day, you've got a client who wants to make money out of the project and get as much out of it as possible.
Yeah.
I don't think you've thought of that enough, but look, that'll come to you the first day you get a job.
Yeah.
And your boss says, hey, you can't do that. But otherwise, can you show me some of the colours and so on in that building?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like your booths very much.
Thank you.
And I think, are they transparent screens between booths?
Between the booths?
Yeah.
No, it's just
It's just the lighting.
a little, yeah, the lighting is sort of created that.
Well, I think that's the way they're identified. The curves in the counter softens everything. It's a hell of a lot nicer than the box. Nice tones. I like the deep green in the background. Can you go on a little further?
Mm-hmm.
Show me your materials. Oh, go back to the plan again. No, that's all right. We've looked at that. Upstairs again, you know, there's a bit of a waste of space there, but it's the same comments I made with downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment further there. You've got two spaces which allow for flexibility, but again, the more rental space you can get into a building, the more the client's going to like it. Just go into your materials again, please. Nice tones, nice colours. What's that floor? Terrazzo. I've got to think about acoustics all the time, particularly in cafes. You know, when you walk in, well, it's fine at your age where you might want to party on all day and night. When you get to my age, you want a quiet space. So you need to learn about those things, as you will. And look, again, what are your plans for the future, Taylor?
I would eventually like to get a job with a firm. I'm feeling a little bit uncertain at the moment with, you know, studying further or trying to find a job sooner rather than later. Yeah, I'm still trying to work it out.
As we said previously, try and do both. If you get part-time work, even if it's a couple of days a week, and continue studying while you identify with yourself your own direction and where you'd like to be in the future, That's ideal, because it's without experience, it's very difficult to get a job. And I've said this previously, I keep on saying, if you've had part-time experience and you study, you'll get jobs easily. But more importantly for yourself, you'll define your own directions as you go forward. But look, really well done. Great presentation, and the best of luck in the future.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Christina, you're going to finish off, please.
Sure, no problem. I'll try not to rehash too much of what everyone else has said, because I agree with all of it pretty much. So I might just start here. Might be easier for you to kind of flick around, Taylor. But firstly, thank you. Great presentation. Tough year to have gotten to this point. So well done.
Thank you.
Really good effort. I think I really like if you could scroll up just to the 3D image that you've got in the job warehouse. I think it's coming. Yeah. Yep. I think, and I'm probably echoing Ellie's points, but just probably a little bit bare in terms of the furniture and I guess excessive space that's probably been left. So. And I gather it's the view as well that you've taken, but if you're showing a view or a rendered view like this, it's always good to show, I guess, a little bit more activity on in the entire image, but that's obviously related back to your plan where there is that excess of space that you could have filled with more kind of comfortable sofas, back to Dave's point as well, just on just the acoustic kind of softness that this space probably needs. But I get that you were trying to get that kind of polished feel, which you spoke about. I like that the op shop is pared back in terms of how you were saying it was a clean backdrop, because op shops do bring a lot of colour and secondhand, all what is it, licorice, all sorts in terms of colours. So that's good that you've got a great clean backdrop. But again, probably more, just need more fixtures and support for where you'd actually put most of the storage, but that's down to detail as well.
Yeah.
Are you able to go to the plan, the plans for Job Warehouse?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So again, similar to, the others' comments. If we look at the recreation rooms, there's probably some corridors again, that a bit of dead space there, and it probably would have been, given that the recreation rooms are kind of fixed, it'd probably be great to put some flexible walls in there so it can allow for a larger space. But I think I'm echoing again David's points just around testing the spaces and sketching, and I think different scenario planning would have helped you here as well in terms of the lift locations and some of those kind of fundamental operational I guess plans that you can, or planning that you get from doing a few different sketches in butter paper on top of what you've done, and that kind of helps inform where you put some of these kind of entrances and bathrooms, etc. But I think yeah, all in all, look, I think there's heaps of potential to develop this, and as you said, probably didn't have as much time as potentially the Intercontinental, but there's certainly room for adding those types of layers and all those different scenarios and furniture layouts in the future. So I think that's all I had for Job Warehouse just checking my notes again. Yep. So if you could flick to the Intercontinental, that'd be great. Yeah, I really liked, I guess, the use of colour, and I think it's a really good, I guess it's a bit more playful, and that allows for a bit more comfort always when you add colour. It's a very bold, they are bold colours, but they work together quite well. The numbers, probably same commentary around the numbers. You probably could have identified each of the pods with other colours as well, given that you've allowed that pop to come through, and that might have been another way to kind of identify the pods outside of the numbers that are on there. But I like the layering use, and again, echo everyone's points in your thinking around the ergonomics and actually getting ready in the space as well as sleeping in the space. So that's allowing for that kind of personal, your own personal kind of space within the pods. So I think you've done that well. And greenery, massively important. Haven't seen a lot of it, so that against the brick of this beautiful building that is the Intercontinental with greenery always just looks stunning, even when you see it in the space as it is. So I think if you're bringing that into some of these spaces, it always just adds that extra layer of comfort that I think the users of this space would really benefit from.
Mm-hmm.
And what else? Wayfinding was also good in your planning. Again, some excessive use of space if you want to flick up to the plans. Just around the lockers, you could fit more in, but you can always fit more lockers in. And I think, I think just generally the way that the pods are laid out, it's quite good. You've got communal lounges coming off of those again. So, I think you've done really well. But I think, in terms of scenario sketching and planning, that might have helped some of the infrastructure of Job Warehouse in particular, and just your thoughts around developing those might have been a bit more of a help to you. But again, congratulations, well done.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody got any further comments they would like to make, or well, I know Dennis, it says he has something else he wants to say, so I'll put him on and then we'll get some feedback from Despina.
Taylor.
Taylor.
You've had a bit of not so much criticism, but comment about the numbers. You know, in a way, I think it's not a bad idea, because you don't know what sort of state these people are going to be in. And having a number, it is a number, I know, and they're used to it. Maybe they don't like numbers. But it's coming to number 7. That's my place, you know?
Yeah.
You leave it and come back. You're not confused because they're all the same. Number 7's yours. So I don't mind it.
Thank you. That was my thought process behind it as well.
Number 7's mine for tonight, maybe tomorrow night. And I know where to find it. That's it.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
That's all right.
Okay. Have you got any questions that you would like to ask, Taylor?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, we've got the other 2 girls waiting. Emily and Desi, if you'd like to come in, and we'll just finish up this session.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Taylor.
Okay, and where's
Thanks, Taylor.
is Desi about?
No, I maybe Desi.
Sorry.
So sorry, Christina. I thought maybe Desi wasn't going to come back because she got her comments earlier.
Yeah. Oh well.
So can I just really quickly just thank everybody. I do need to get going, but I'll leave you with Karen. I do need to go back to Swinburne and set up for tomorrow the actual virtual exhibition. But again, I can't thank you guys enough for participating in our event. And I do hope that, we want to keep this going, and I do hope that you'll be able to join us again next year, because your input and your feedback to the students have been really wonderful and very well received. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Have a good day, everyone.
After Kathleen, that's
Don't forget
Thank
to contact me, Kathleen, to tell me what I'm supposed to do this afternoon.
Yes. I'll give you a call. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.
Emily, have you got any questions that you'd like to ask before we close up?
No, I don't. I just remember Kathleen mentioning to join back in just to see if there was any other further discussion. So I thought I'd pop back in to see what else is happening, but that was it.
Walked out, to be honest. Okay. Well, thanks, everybody. so much. It's been really good, and I just think that the students have learnt so much. And you know, some tough criticism in some ways, but that's life, and that's what we all have to work with. You know, you never learn from the good things.
But it would be worse if we had nothing to say, Karen. I always find that the more the students are, the better students get a tougher time in a way, because there's more to see and there's more to discuss, and there's things that obviously stimulate that discussion, ideas and whatnot. I think it would be worse if we're all sitting there saying nothing. That would be so. No, don't. I wouldn't take, like I said to the other students, don't take it personally, because it's in fact a compliment that we have so much to say.
Absolutely. Okay, well, take care, everybody.
Sorry, Karen, can I say one more thing? Sorry, I know Taylor mentioned that it is an uncertain time, and I just want to reiterate to the guys, Emily and Taylor, that are on the call, that yes, it is, but be optimistic. There's a lot out there, and if you don't find what you're looking for and you don't know whether to study or not, it'll work itself out. But just keep contacting different architecture firms, design firms, even furniture suppliers, and just try and get into the industry in different ways if you can. But just be optimistic. Things are going to change and change for the better.
Definitely, there's lots of potential out there for work.
Yeah.
All right, and take care, everybody, and thank you very much for your time and your enthusiasm.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, everyone.
Best wishes. Bye.